Marcus wiped grease from his calloused hands, staring at the pathetic paycheck his manager had just slammed onto the workbench. 22 years of expertise, of fixing what others couldn't, reduced to barely minimum wage. Take it or leave it, his manager had sneered, walking away from the man who'd saved the shop thousands in lost customers. The humiliation burned hotter than the engine he'd just rebuilt. Years later, Marcus stood in a marble-floored showroom, surrounded by gleaming Ferraris and Lamborghinis, worth more than most people's homes. Clients in tailored suits waited respectfully for his consultation, checkbooks ready. The phone rang constantly, another celebrity, another millionaire seeking his legendary touch. As he approached the microphone to address the crowd of investors and automotive journalists gathered for his company's expansion announcement, his hand trembled slightly. What country are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, and if these stories inspire you, feel free to subscribe. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the cramped garage bay, where Marcus Hernandez spent 14 hours each day. His back ached from hunching over engines. His knees protested against the cold concrete, but his hands moved with the precision of a surgeon. 22 years in this place had carved deep lines around his eyes and permanent grease stains under his fingernails that no amount of scrubbing could remove. The morning sun barely penetrated the grimy windows as Marcus arrived at 5:30, 2 hours before anyone else. This was his sanctuary time, when the garage belonged only to him and the broken machines that trusted him with their secrets. He learned to read engines like poetry. Every skip, every knock, every whisper told him exactly what was wrong and how to make it right. Mrs. Chen's Honda sat in Bay 3, the same car he'd been nursing back to health for the past decade. She couldn't afford a new one, and Marcus made sure she never had to. His fingers traced the worn engine block, feeling for the subtle vibration that had brought her in yesterday. Worry etched across her weathered face. "My grandson needs me to drive him to school," she'd whispered, pressing a crumpled $20 bill into his palm. "It's all I have this week." Marcus had closed her fingers around the money. "Let me look at it first." Now in the quiet morning light, he discovered the problem. A loose belt tensioner that would cost $3 to fix. He smiled, the first genuine expression to cross his face in weeks. Some victories were measured in small moments of grace. The familiar slam of the office door announced his manager's arrival. Rick Dalton strutted across the garage floor in his pristine clothes and spotless hands, surveying his domain like a king inspecting his peasants. He'd inherited the shop from his father 2 years ago and immediately set about squeezing every penny from both customers and employees. "Hernandez!" Rick's voice cut through the morning stillness. "My office. Now." Marcus wiped his hands slowly, dreading whatever fresh hell awaited him. The office reeked of cheap cologne and instant coffee, its wood-paneled walls covered with certificates Rick had never earned and photos of cars he'd never built. "Sit down," Rick commanded, not looking up from his paperwork. "We need to discuss your situation." The words hung in the air like exhaust fumes. Marcus remained standing, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. "Your situation?" Rick repeated, finally lifting his gaze. 22 years here, and what do you have to show for it? You're still turning wrenches like some kid fresh out of trade school. Heat flushed Marcus's neck. "I've saved this shop more money than..." "Have you?" Rick leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "Because from where I sit, you're just another mechanic, replaceable. There are a dozen guys who'd love your job." The ledger book lay open on Rick's desk, showing the shop's profits. Marcus could see the numbers from where he stood. Revenue had increased 40% since Rick took over, largely due to Marcus's reputation drawing customers from 3 counties away. Word traveled fast when someone could diagnose problems others missed, when someone treated every car like it belonged to family. Here's the deal," Rick continued, sliding a paper across the desk. "New contract. Take it or leave it." Marcus's eyes scanned the document, his heart sinking with each line. The proposed salary was barely above minimum wage, less than what Rick paid the kid who swept floors and answered phones. After 22 years of dedication, of working weekends and holidays, of building the reputation that kept this place profitable, he was being offered poverty wages. "This is less than I made 5 years ago," Marcus said quietly. "Cost of living adjustments," Rick shrugged. "Business is tough. Overhead's expensive. My hands are tied." But Marcus had seen the books. He knew about Rick's new Porsche parked behind the building, about the vacation home in Aspen, about the expensive dinners charged to the company account. His expertise had built this prosperity, and now he was being cast aside like a worn-out part. "I need time to think about it," Marcus managed. "You have until 5 o'clock today." Rick's tone suggested the conversation was over. "And Hernandez? Don't think you can take any customers with you. I've got lawyers who specialize in that sort of thing." The threat landed like a physical blow. Rick knew exactly how much Marcus depended on this job, how few options existed for a 50-year-old mechanic in a small town. The implied message was clear: accept humiliation or face financial ruin. Marcus walked back to his bay in a daze, the contract clutched in his oil-stained fingers. Mrs. Chen's Honda seemed to mock him with its simple problem and simple solution. If only his own situation could be fixed so easily. The morning wore on, each task feeling heavier than usual. When the coffee break bell rang, Marcus found himself alone in the parking lot, staring at the mountains in the distance. 22 years of his life poured into this place. 22 years of expertise dismissed with the casual cruelty of paperwork. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter Rosa. "Dad, can you help with Maria's school supplies? Money's tight this month." His granddaughter was starting first grade. She'd been so excited, showing him her new backpack, her small hands carefully writing her name on folders and notebooks. How could he explain that Grandpa might not be able to help anymore? The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, each one a reminder of the reputation he'd built and the respect he'd earned. Joe Martinez brought his pickup truck, refusing to let anyone else touch it. "Marcus is the only one who understands this old girl," he'd say, patting the hood affectionately. Sarah Williams arrived with her teenage son's modified Honda, frustrated after 3 shops had failed to diagnose a persistent miss in the engine. Marcus listened to the car for 30 seconds and identified the problem. A subtle timing issue that required the kind of experience that couldn't be taught in any classroom. "You're a miracle worker," Sarah breathed, relief flooding her voice. "How much do I owe you?" Marcus looked at the simple fix, then at Rick watching from the office window. $50, he said, knowing Rick would charge 3 times that amount. As closing time approached, the weight of decision pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. He'd spent his lunch break walking through the small downtown area, imagining himself starting over somewhere else. But at 50 years old, with a mortgage and family responsibilities, the prospect felt overwhelming. 5 o'clock arrived with the finality of a funeral bell. Marcus found himself back in Rick's office, the contract still unsigned in his pocket. "Well?" Rick didn't bother looking up from his computer screen. Marcus thought of his granddaughter's excited face, of Mrs. Chen's grateful smile, of all the customers who trusted him with their most precious possessions. He thought of 22 years of expertise, of knowledge that couldn't be replaced or replicated. Then he thought of Rick's Porsche, bought with profits generated by Marcus's reputation and skill. "I need more time," Marcus said finally. Rick's head snapped up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Time for what?" "It's a simple yes or no question. It's my livelihood, my family's future." "Your family's future depends on having a job at all." Rick's voice turned cold. "You're not exactly in a position to negotiate, old man." The words stung, but they also sparked something that had been smoldering in Marcus's chest for months. A quiet anger, carefully controlled but growing stronger with each indignity. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow morning," Marcus said, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. Rick's eyes narrowed. "Fine, but understand, if you think you can find something better at your age in this economy, you're deluding yourself. This is the best offer you're going to get." That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the contract spread before him like a medical diagnosis. His wife Elena moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing dinner with the same gentle efficiency she'd shown for 30 years of marriage. She didn't ask about his day. The tension in his shoulders told her everything she needed to know. "Rosa called," Elena said softly, setting a plate before him. "She wanted to thank you for helping with Maria's school supplies." Marcus had forgotten about the text, forgotten about his promise to help. The guilt twisted in his stomach like a physical pain. "I told her we'd figure something out," Elena continued, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder. "We always do." The simple faith in her voice nearly broke him. Elena had worked double shifts at the hospital for years, her small salary helping to bridge the gaps that Marcus's wages couldn't cover. She'd never complained, never questioned his dedication to a job that barely valued his presence. After dinner, Marcus walked to his small workshop behind the house. This was where magic happened, where he restored classic cars as a hobby, where neighborhood kids brought their bicycles for repair, where he found peace in the honest work of fixing what was broken. His current project, a 1967 Mustang Fastback, sat partially assembled under the overhead light. He'd been working on it for 3 years, every spare dollar going toward authentic parts, every weekend devoted to meticulous restoration. The car was nearly complete, its gleaming paint job reflecting years of careful labor. Marcus ran his fingers along the smooth fender, remembering the day he'd found the car in a salvage yard. Most people would have seen only rust and ruin, but Marcus had seen potential. He'd seen what it could become with enough patience, skill, and love. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Hello? Mr. Hernandez? This is James Morrison. I got your number from Sarah Williams. You worked on her son's Honda today?" Marcus frowned, trying to place the name. "Yes, sir. Is there a problem with the repair?" "Oh, no problem at all. The opposite, actually. Sarah told me you diagnosed in minutes what 3 other shops couldn't figure out in weeks. I'm wondering if you might be available for a consultation?" The word consultation struck Marcus as odd. Most people just wanted their cars fixed, not consultations. "What kind of car are we talking about?" Marcus asked. "Well, it's a bit unusual. I collect vintage Ferraris, and I've got a 1973 Dino that's been giving me trouble. 3 different specialists have looked at it, but the problem persists. Sarah seemed to think you might have insights they missed. A Ferrari Dino." Marcus's pulse quickened despite himself. He'd worked on exotic cars before, but always in secret, always as favors for customers he'd grown to trust. Rick actively discouraged such work, claiming the shop wasn't equipped for high-end vehicles. "I'd be happy to take a look," Marcus heard himself saying. "But I should mention, I'm not officially certified for Ferrari work." James Morrison chuckled. "Son, I've learned that the best mechanics aren't always the ones with the fanciest certificates. Sarah said you have magic hands. That's what I'm looking for." They arranged to meet the following evening at Morrison's private garage. As Marcus hung up the phone, a strange sensation settled in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, perhaps, or possibility. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching Marcus's mood as he drove to work. The contract remained unsigned in his jacket pocket, a constant reminder of the choice that awaited him. He arrived early as always, seeking comfort in the familiar routine of organizing tools and checking work orders. Rick's Porsche wasn't in its usual spot. Marcus allowed himself a small moment of relief, knowing he'd have a few hours to work in peace before facing the inevitable confrontation. Mrs. Chen arrived just after 8, her grandson Tommy in tow. The boy, maybe 7 years old, watched with wide eyes as Marcus popped the hood of their Honda. "Is it very sick?" Tommy asked solemnly. Marcus smiled, the first genuine expression he'd managed in days. "Just a little tired, like when you need to adjust your backpack straps so they don't hurt your shoulders." He showed Tommy the loose belt tensioner, explaining in simple terms how the small part helped the engine breathe properly. The boy listened with the intense focus that only children could muster, asking thoughtful questions that reminded Marcus why he'd fallen in love with mechanics in the first place. "There," Marcus said, tightening the final bolt. "Good as new." The Honda's engine purred contentedly, all traces of the troublesome vibration gone. Mrs. Chen clasped her hands together, relief flooding her weathered features. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching for her small purse. Marcus looked at the $3 part, then at Tommy's excited face as he listened to the smooth engine. "No charge. Just keep taking good care of this car." Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. She pressed something into Marcus's hand, a small origami crane folded from bright red paper. "My grandson made this for you. He said it's to bring you good luck." As their Honda disappeared down the street, Marcus examined the delicate paper crane. Such a small thing, but crafted with care and offered with love. He tucked it carefully into his shirt pocket, next to his heart. The morning brought a steady stream of work, each repair reinforcing Marcus's sense of purpose. A young mother's minivan with a failing alternator. A college student's budget sedan that needed brake pads. An elderly man's classic truck that just needed someone to listen to its particular rhythm. Each customer left grateful, relieved, trusting. Marcus realized that what he'd built over 22 years wasn't just a reputation. It was a series of relationships, connections forged through competence and care. Rick's Porsche roared into the parking lot just before noon, its aggressive engine note announcing his return. Marcus's stomach tightened as he watched his manager stride across the garage floor, expensive shoes clicking against concrete. "Hernandez, my office. Now." The familiar command carried extra menace today. Marcus wiped his hands methodically, buying precious seconds before the confrontation. Rick sat behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver sentence. The unsigned contract lay prominently displayed, a visual reminder of power and submission. "Well?" Rick's voice cut through the silence. Marcus reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against both the contract and Mrs. Chen's origami crane, two symbols of vastly different futures. "I need to ask you something first," Marcus said quietly. Rick's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You need to ask me something? You're in no position to make demands." "Not a demand, a question." Marcus's voice remained steady. "In 22 years, have I ever let you down? Have I ever failed to solve a problem that was brought to me? What does that have to do with anything? Have I ever cost you a customer? Have I ever damaged equipment or made a mistake that hurt the business?" Rick shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Look, this isn't about your technical skills." "Then what is it about?" The question hung in the air between them. Rick's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something petty and cruel underneath. "It's about knowing your place. You're a mechanic, Hernandez. A good one, I'll give you that, but still just a mechanic. You don't get to question how I run my business." The truth finally stood naked in the room. This wasn't about money or overhead or market conditions. This was about power, about keeping someone talented and experienced beaten down and grateful for scraps. Marcus pulled the contract from his pocket and set it carefully on the desk. In the same motion, he reached for his work keys and placed them beside it. "I quit," he said simply. Rick's face went through several expressions: surprise, anger, and finally a cruel satisfaction. "Good luck finding another job at your age. And remember what I said about taking customers with you. I'll sue you into oblivion if you try." Marcus stood slowly, his joints protesting after decades of physical labor. "I won't need to take anyone. People who want quality work know where to find me." As he walked toward the door, Rick's voice followed him. "You'll be back. In a month, maybe 2. You'll come crawling back begging for this job." Marcus paused at the threshold. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe I'll finally find out what I'm really worth." The garage fell silent as Marcus cleaned out his toolbox. Decades of accumulated equipment fitting into 3 worn cases. His fellow mechanics watched nervously, afraid to speak but clearly shaken by what they'd witnessed. If someone like Marcus, reliable, skilled, indispensable, could be cast aside so casually, what did that mean for the rest of them? Elena was in the garden when Marcus arrived home at 2 in the afternoon, her hands deep in the rich soil of their vegetable patch. She looked up as his truck pulled into the driveway, immediately reading the situation in his posture and expression. And, how did it go?" she asked gently, brushing dirt from her hands. Marcus told her everything, from Rick's ultimatum to his own moment of decision. Elena listened without interruption, her calm presence anchoring him as the reality of their situation began to sink in. "Are you scared?" she asked when he finished. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "We've got bills, the mortgage. Rosa might need help with Maria's school expenses. I'm 50 years old with a high school education and grease under my fingernails." Elena took his hands in hers, seemingly unbothered by the calluses and stains that marked years of honest work. "You're also the most skilled mechanic in 3 counties. You're the man people trust with their most precious possessions. You're the person who fixes things that nobody else can fix." That evening, Marcus kept his appointment with James Morrison. The address led him to an impressive estate on the outskirts of town, its long driveway lined with mature oak trees. The private garage was larger than most auto repair shops, with gleaming floors and professional-grade equipment. But it was the cars that took Marcus's breath away. A pristine 1955 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, a legendary Porsche 911 Carrera RS, a Ford GT40 that looked like it had just rolled off the Le Mans track. And there in the center of the collection sat the troubled Ferrari Dino. James Morrison emerged from a small office, extending a weathered hand in greeting. He was perhaps 70 years old with silver hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Hernandez, thank you for coming. I hope you don't mind, but I did a little research after Sarah gave me your name. Your reputation is quite impressive." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I just try to do good work. More than good from what I hear. Joe Martinez told me you've kept his 1985 Chevy running for 15 years past its natural lifespan. Mrs. Chen credits you with saving her family thousands in car payments. And Sarah's boy says you're the only mechanic who doesn't treat him like he's an idiot for modifying his Honda." The praise felt strange after Rick's constant dismissal. Marcus found himself standing straighter, remembering what pride in his work felt like. "Tell me about the Dino," Marcus said, approaching the sleek Italian sports car. "She's a beauty, isn't she? 1973 matching numbers, completely original except for some suspension work done in the 80s. But there's this intermittent miss in the engine, usually when she's fully warmed up. 3 Ferrari specialists have looked at it, replaced various components, but the problem persists. Marcus circled the car slowly, his trained eye taking in every detail. The paint was immaculate. The interior showed careful maintenance. But something in the engine bay caught his attention immediately. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the hood. "Please." Marcus spent 20 minutes examining the V6 engine, his hands moving with surgical precision as he checked connections, tested components, and listened to the motor's subtle rhythms. Finally, he straightened up with a small smile. "I think I know the problem," he said, "but I'd like to drive it first just to confirm." Of course. The keys are on the workbench. The dyno felt alive beneath Marcus's hands, its steering communicating every nuance of the road surface. He drove carefully at first, then with growing confidence as the car revealed its personality. Sure enough, after 15 minutes of driving, the telltale miss appeared. Subtle, irregular, just enough to mar the engine's perfect symphony. Back at the garage, Marcus pointed to a specific area of the engine bay. It's the fuel injection relay. The contacts are starting to corrode, causing intermittent connection loss. The other mechanics were looking for mechanical problems, but this is electrical. James Morrison's eyebrows rose. "That's remarkably specific. Are you certain?" "Let me show you." Marcus carefully removed the relay, revealing the subtle green corrosion on its contacts. "See this? It's barely visible, but when the relay heats up during extended driving, the corrosion expands just enough to interrupt the connection." "My God," Morrison breathed. 3 specialists missed that? It's easy to miss if you don't know what to look for. Classic Italian electrical systems have their quirks. I've seen this exact problem twice before, both times on mid-70s Ferraris. They spent the next hour discussing the car's history and Marcus's approach to diagnosis. Morrison proved to be a knowledgeable enthusiast, someone who understood that proper maintenance was as much art as science. "I have to ask," Morrison said as Marcus prepared to leave, "are you available for ongoing work? I've got 6 cars in this collection, and finding someone with your diagnostic skills has been challenging." Marcus hesitated. "I should mention I just left my job today. I'm not sure what my immediate plans are." "Actually, that works out perfectly. I've been thinking about bringing someone on to maintain this collection properly. Someone who understands that these cars aren't just machines. They're pieces of history that deserve respect and expertise." They discussed terms, compensation, the scope of work. Marcus found himself barely believing the numbers Morrison mentioned. Hourly rates that exceeded his old monthly salary, plus bonuses for complex restoration work. "There's one condition," Morrison added. "I'd want exclusive access to your skills for collector car work, but you'd be free to take on regular automotive repair for other customers. In fact, I'd encourage it. Skills like yours need to stay sharp." As Marcus drove home, his mind raced with possibilities. Morrison's offer was generous, but it was more than money. It was recognition, respect, a chance to work on machines that challenged his abilities and rewarded his expertise. Elena was waiting in the kitchen, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of her. The worry lines around her eyes spoke of hours spent contemplating their uncertain future. "How did it go?" she asked, trying to keep hope from her voice. Marcus told her about the Ferrari, about Morrison's collection, about the job offer that seemed too good to be true. As he spoke, Elena's expression shifted from worry to amazement to something approaching disbelief. "He offered you how much per hour?" she whispered. "Plus restoration bonuses, plus the freedom to take on other customers." Marcus shook his head. "Elena, this could change everything for us." That night, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling, his mind churning with plans and possibilities. For 22 years, he'd been undervalued, dismissed, treated as a replaceable part in someone else's machine. Now suddenly, his expertise was being treated as the rare commodity it truly was. The next morning brought both opportunity and challenge. Marcus's phone rang before 7. Joe Martinez, panic in his voice. "Marcus, thank God you answered. My truck won't start, and I've got to get to work. Can you help me?" "I'm not at the shop anymore, Joe. I quit yesterday." A long pause. "You quit? Why?" Marcus gave a condensed version of events, watching Joe's expression shift from confusion to anger. "That's the stupidest thing Rick's ever done, and that's saying something. Look, can you come take a look anyway? I'll pay you whatever you think is fair. I'll be right over." Joe's truck sat in his driveway like a faithful old dog that had suddenly lost its bark. Marcus diagnosed the problem quickly. A failed starter relay, identical to hundreds he'd replaced over the years. But as he worked, neighbors began to appear. Word of his departure from Rick's shop had traveled fast in their small community. Mrs. Patterson from down the street brought her sedan with its chronic alignment issues. Tony Valdez rolled up with his motorcycle, which had been running rough since another shop had tuned it the week before. By noon, Marcus had 5 vehicles in various stages of repair scattered around Joe's property. "This is crazy," Joe laughed, watching Marcus juggle multiple repairs with the ease of long practice. "You should open your own shop." The suggestion hit Marcus like a physical blow. His own shop. The dream he'd harbored secretly for years, always dismissed as impractical, impossible, too risky for a man with responsibilities. "I don't have the capital," Marcus said automatically. "Equipment, real estate, licensing, insurance, it would cost a fortune." What if it didn't?" The voice came from behind him. Marcus turned to find James Morrison approaching, having apparently witnessed the impromptu repair clinic. "Mr. Morrison? What are you doing here?" "Joe Martinez called me. Thought I should see this." Morrison gestured at the organized chaos of Marcus's outdoor workshop. 5 different problems, all being solved simultaneously by one man with a toolbox. It's quite impressive. Morrison walked slowly among the vehicles, examining Marcus's work with the eye of someone who understood quality. "Tell me something," he said finally. "If money weren't an object, what would you do?" Marcus straightened up from Mrs. Patterson's engine bay, considering the question seriously. "I'd open a shop that specialized in difficult diagnoses, problems other places can't solve. I'd work on everything from classic cars to daily drivers, but I'd focus on the challenging cases that require real expertise." "Interesting. And where would you locate such a shop?" "There's an old garage on Maple Street that's been empty for 2 years. Good location, decent building, but the previous owner couldn't make it work." Marcus found himself speaking faster, the vision becoming clearer as he described it. "It would need work, new equipment, updated electrical, proper ventilation, but the bones are solid." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "What would you estimate for startup costs? Complete setup, first year's operating expenses, everything?" Marcus did quick mental calculations, adding conservative buffers for unexpected expenses. "Maybe $200,000 all in, but that's money I don't have and can't borrow." "What if you had a partner? Someone who provided the capital in exchange for a percentage of the business?" The offer hung in the air like morning mist, beautiful and insubstantial. Marcus stared at Morrison, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "You're serious?" "Completely. I've been looking for investment opportunities in the automotive sector, and frankly, finding competent mechanics has become nearly impossible. Someone with your skills, your reputation, your work ethic, that's rarer than any car in my collection." They spent the afternoon discussing details, possibilities, terms of partnership. Morrison would provide initial capital and ongoing financial backing. Marcus would contribute his expertise, his customer relationships, and his absolute commitment to quality work. "I have one concern," Morrison said as their conversation wound down. "Rick Dalton mentioned legal action if you compete with his shop. How serious is that threat?" Marcus had been dreading this question. "Probably not very. I never signed a non-compete agreement, and you can't prevent someone from using their skills to make a living. But Rick has lawyers and money. Even if he can't win, he can make things expensive and difficult." "Let me worry about Rick Dalton," Morrison said quietly. "I have lawyers too, and they're considerably better than his." That evening, Marcus sat in his backyard workshop, the partially restored Mustang gleaming under the overhead lights. Elena sat beside him on an old wooden crate, both of them trying to process the day's surreal developments. "It feels too good to be true," Elena said softly. "Things like this don't happen to people like us." Marcus understood her caution. They'd spent 30 years living paycheck to paycheck, making do with less, accepting that some dreams were for other people. The possibility of sudden change felt almost frightening in its magnitude. "What if we fail?" Elena continued. "What if we put everything on the line and it doesn't work? Then we'll be no worse off than we were yesterday." Marcus replied, "But Elena, what if we succeed? What if we build something that gives us financial security, that lets us help Rosa with Maria's education, that provides good jobs for other mechanics?" They talked late into the night, weighing risks against rewards, fear against hope. By morning, they'd reached their decision. Marcus called Morrison at 8 o'clock sharp. "I'm in," he said simply. "Excellent. I'll have my attorneys draw up partnership agreements. In the meantime, why don't we take a look at that building on Maple Street?" The old garage sat like a sleeping giant, its brick facade weathered but sturdy. Marcus walked slowly through the empty bays, his imagination already filling the space with proper equipment. efficient workflows, the organized chaos of productive work. Morrison watched silently as Marcus examined electrical systems, measured work areas, and evaluated the building's potential. Finally, Marcus turned with a grin that Elena hadn't seen in years. "This could work," he said. "This could really work." The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, permits, equipment orders, and renovations. Marcus threw himself into the project with an energy he'd forgotten he possessed, working 18-hour days to transform the abandoned garage into a modern automotive facility. Morrison proved to be more than just a financial partner. His connections in the business world opened doors that would have remained closed to Marcus alone. Insurance at reasonable rates, financing for equipment, even customers who came specifically because Morrison had recommended the new shop. Word spread quickly through the community. Marcus's phone rang constantly with people wanting to know when he'd be open for business, what services he'd offer, whether he'd be taking appointments. The enthusiasm was overwhelming and slightly terrifying. Rick Dalton made his promised legal threats, sending cease and desist letters claiming unfair competition and stolen trade secrets. Morrison's attorneys responded with such swift and decisive action that Rick's lawyers advised him to drop the matter entirely. Apparently, Morrison reported with evident satisfaction, threatening to sue a mechanic for using mechanical skills constitutes frivolous litigation. Rick's been warned that continued harassment could result in countersuits for business interference. 3 months after walking out of Rick's shop, Marcus stood in his own garage, Hernandez Automotive Diagnostics, putting the finishing touches on their opening preparations. The space was a mechanic's dream. State-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, properly organized tool systems, comfortable customer waiting area, and 6 fully equipped work bays. Elena had insisted on handling the business side of operations, bringing organizational skills honed through years of hospital administration. Their daughter Rosa had designed a website and social media presence that looked professionally polished while maintaining the personal touch that made Marcus's approach special. Opening day arrived with the nervous excitement of a first date. Marcus arrived at 5:30 in the morning, unable to sleep, wanting everything to be perfect. The first customer was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Mrs. Chen, bringing her faithful Honda for its regular maintenance. She arrived 15 minutes early, Tommy in tow as always. The boy's eyes went wide as he took in the gleaming facility, the organized tools, the professional atmosphere. "Wow, Mr. Marcus, this is really yours?" "All ours," Marcus replied, feeling pride swell in his chest. Mrs. Chen pressed another origami crane into his palm, this one folded from golden paper. "For your new beginning," she said softly. By 10 o'clock, all 6 bays were occupied. Joe Martinez, Sarah Williams, Tony Valdez, and other longtime customers had scheduled appointments to support Marcus's opening day. But there were new faces too. People who'd heard about the mechanic who could solve problems others couldn't, who treated every repair as a personal challenge. At noon, an unexpected visitor arrived. James Morrison pulled up in a different car, a pristine 1963 Aston Martin DB5, its British racing green paint gleaming in the sunlight. "Congratulations," Morrison said, surveying the bustling garage with evident satisfaction. "How does it feel to be a business owner?" Marcus looked around at the organized chaos, the satisfied customers, the sense of purpose that filled every corner of the space, terrifying and wonderful at the same time. The best ventures usually are. "I brought you something of a challenge." Morrison patted the Aston Martin's hood. "She's been running rough, and the specialists in the city haven't been able to diagnose the problem. Thought you might enjoy the puzzle." Marcus approached the legendary sports car with appropriate reverence. This was the same model driven by James Bond in Goldfinger, a piece of automotive history that demanded his absolute best effort. The diagnostic process took 2 hours, involving careful listening, systematic testing, and the kind of intuitive problem-solving that couldn't be taught in any school. Finally, Marcus identified the culprit, a subtle vacuum leak in the original carburetor assembly, so small that conventional testing had missed it. "Remarkable." Morrison breathed as the Aston Martin purred with renewed smoothness. "Simply remarkable." The previous mechanic suggested rebuilding the entire engine. Word of the Aston Martin repair spread through collector car circles like wildfire. By the end of the first week, Marcus had appointments scheduled with owners of vintage Porsches, classic Ferraris, and exotic sports cars he'd only dreamed of working on. But he didn't abandon his bread-and-butter customers. Mrs. Chen's Honda received the same meticulous attention as Morrison's Ferrari. Tony's motorcycle got the same diagnostic thoroughness as a $1 million classic car. Every customer left satisfied, impressed, eager to recommend Hernandez Automotive to their friends and family. 3 months into operations, Elena sat down with Marcus to review their financial position. The numbers were almost unbelievable. Revenue that exceeded their most optimistic projections. Profit margins that allowed for equipment upgrades and facility improvements. Enough success to justify hiring their first employee. "We need help," Elena said, scanning the appointment book that was booked solid for the next 6 weeks. "You can't keep working 80-hour weeks and we're turning away customers." Marcus knew she was right, but the prospect of hiring someone felt overwhelming. How do you find people who share your commitment to quality, your respect for both machines and customers? The answer came from an unexpected source. Danny Rodriguez, a young mechanic who'd worked at Rick's shop, appeared at closing time on a Tuesday evening. Marcus recognized him immediately. Talented, eager to learn, but constantly frustrated by Rick's limitations and corner-cutting approach. "Mr. Hernandez," Danny said nervously, "I heard you might be hiring. I know I'm young and I don't have your experience, but I'm willing to learn. I've been watching what you've built here, and I want to be part of something like this." Marcus studied the young man's face, seeing his own younger self in the earnest expression and calloused hands. "Tell me why you want to work here instead of staying at Rick's shop." "Because over there, we fix cars to get them out the door as fast as possible. Here you fix them to make them better than they were before. That's the kind of mechanic I want to become." Danny started the following Monday, beginning a mentorship relationship that reminded Marcus why he'd fallen in love with automotive repair in the first place. Teaching someone who genuinely wanted to learn, sharing knowledge accumulated over decades of experience, watching skill develop under careful guidance, it was deeply satisfying in ways Marcus hadn't expected. Within 6 months, they hired a second mechanic, then a third. Each new employee was chosen not just for technical ability, but for attitude, work ethic, and commitment to the shop's growing reputation for excellence. Rick Dalton's business, meanwhile, began showing signs of serious decline. Without Marcus's expertise and reputation to draw customers, revenue dropped precipitously. Several longtime customers had followed Marcus to his new location, while others simply went elsewhere, rather than accept inferior service. Marcus felt no satisfaction in his former employer's struggles. If anything, he felt sorry for the mechanics still trapped in that environment, talented people prevented from doing their best work by management that valued profit over quality. One evening, as Marcus was closing up the shop, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Rick's number. "Hernandez? It's Rick Dalton." Marcus almost hung up, but curiosity held him back. "What do you want, Rick?" "I want to make you an offer. Come back. I'll match whatever you're making at your little garage, plus 20%. You can be shop foreman, make all the technical decisions." The offer was stunning in its arrogance and desperation. Marcus looked around his thriving business, thought about his satisfied customers, considered the 3 mechanics he was training to carry on his standards of excellence. "Rick," Marcus said quietly, "I'm not an employee anymore. I'm a business owner. I've got 6 bays booked solid for the next 2 months. Customers who drive from 3 states away for specialized work, and a reputation that's built on quality instead of quick fixes. Come on, be reasonable. You're getting in over your head with all this business ownership stuff. You're a mechanic, not an entrepreneur." The words echoed Rick's dismissive attitude from months earlier, but now they carried no sting. Marcus had proven to himself and the world exactly what he was capable of when his expertise was properly valued. "You're right about one thing," Marcus replied. "I am a mechanic, the best one in 3 counties. And that's exactly why I don't need to work for you anymore." He hung up before Rick could respond. 2 years after opening Hernandez Automotive Diagnostics, Marcus found himself facing a new challenge. Success had brought opportunities he'd never imagined, but also responsibilities that stretched his abilities in unexpected directions. Morrison had introduced him to other collectors, business owners who valued quality over convenience. Word had spread through networks Marcus didn't even know existed. Vintage car clubs, restoration societies, automotive enthusiasts with deep pockets and discriminating tastes. The result was a steady stream of exotic, challenging, historically significant vehicles that pushed Marcus's diagnostic skills to their limits. A 1954 Mercedes 300 SL with mysterious electrical gremlins. A 1967 Shelby Cobra that had stumped experts across the country. A Ferrari 250 GT that required fabricating reproduction parts to 1960s specifications. Each project was a puzzle that demanded not just mechanical expertise, but historical knowledge, creative problem solving, and absolute attention to detail. Marcus found himself researching manufacturing techniques, consulting with specialists around the world, developing solutions that honored both the original engineering and the car's current needs. But he never forgot his roots. Mrs. Chen still brought her Honda for regular maintenance. Joe Martinez's old truck continued to benefit from Marcus's careful attention. The neighborhood kids still showed up with their bicycles, knowing Marcus would take time from million-dollar restorations to fix a broken chain or adjust brakes. Elena had transformed from reluctant bookkeeper to savvy business manager, handling customer relations, scheduling, and the growing complexity of insurance and regulatory requirements. Her organizational skills, honed through years of hospital administration, proved perfectly suited to managing a business that dealt with everything from daily drivers to automotive museum pieces. Rosa, meanwhile, had started bringing her own car, a practical sedan she'd chosen specifically because it was reliable and economical. But Marcus noticed her watching as he worked on the exotic cars, asking thoughtful questions about engineering and design. "Dad," she said one evening as he was closing up, "I've been thinking about going back to school, maybe studying automotive engineering." The suggestion caught Marcus completely off guard. Rosa had always been academically gifted, but she'd shown no previous interest in following her father's career path. "What brought this on?" he asked. "Watching what you've built here, seeing how you solve problems that nobody else can solve, understanding that automotive repair isn't just about fixing things, it's about understanding how complex systems work together." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "I think I want to learn the engineering side of what you do intuitively." Marcus felt pride and concern in equal measure. Engineering school is expensive, and the automotive industry can be tough for women. "I know, but you always taught me that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing right. And Mom says there's money in the education fund now, thanks to the shop's success." That night, Marcus and Elena discussed their daughter's plans. The financial aspect was no longer the barrier it once would have been. The shop's success had provided stability they'd never known before, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that taking calculated risks could lead to remarkable rewards. "She's got your problem-solving mind and my organizational skills," Elena observed. "Plus, she's grown up around this business. She understands both the technical and customer service sides. The industry needs more engineers who understand the practical aspects of repair and maintenance," Marcus admitted. "Most of them design things they've never had to fix." Rosa's college applications became a family project, with Marcus providing insights into automotive programs, while Elena managed deadlines and requirements. When the acceptance letters arrived, they celebrated at the little Italian restaurant where Marcus and Elena had had their first date 35 years earlier. The third year of operations brought unexpected recognition. A feature article in a national automotive magazine highlighted Marcus's diagnostic expertise and the unique culture he'd created at Hernandez Automotive. The writer, who owned a classic Porsche that Marcus had restored to better than new condition, described the shop as a place where mechanical excellence meets personal integrity. The article generated phone calls from across the country, collectors seeking Marcus's expertise, other shop owners wanting to learn his methods, even automotive manufacturers interested in his diagnostic insights. One call stood out from the rest. Dr. Patricia Lawson, Dean of the Automotive Technology Program at the State University, wanted to discuss a potential partnership. "We've been trying to bridge the gap between academic automotive education and real-world practical experience," she explained during their meeting. "Your shop has developed a reputation for diagnostic excellence that our students need to understand. Would you consider becoming an adjunct instructor?" The proposal was both flattering and terrifying. Marcus had never thought of himself as an educator, despite the success he'd had training his own employees. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach college students," Marcus admitted. "Mr. Hernandez, you're solving problems that stumped factory-trained technicians. You're diagnosing issues on vehicles that specialists with decades of experience couldn't figure out. That's exactly the kind of real-world expertise our program needs." They arranged for Marcus to guest lecture in 3 classes, covering diagnostic methodology, customer relations, and small business operations. The experience proved transformative for both Marcus and the students. The students were hungry for practical knowledge, tired of theoretical discussions that didn't connect to actual problem solving. Marcus's hands-on approach, his emphasis on listening to what cars were trying to communicate, his systematic but intuitive diagnostic methods resonated powerfully. "Professor Marcus," one student said after class, "you make it sound like cars are trying to tell us what's wrong with them." "They are," Marcus replied. Every sound, every vibration, every smell is information. The trick is learning their language. The guest lectures led to a regular teaching position, 1 day per week during the academic year. Marcus found that teaching forced him to articulate knowledge he developed intuitively, to break down complex processes into understandable steps. His students began showing up at the shop, eager to observe real diagnostic work in progress. Marcus created an informal apprenticeship program, allowing promising students to work part-time while completing their studies. The university connection also led to research opportunities. Automotive manufacturers, struggling with increasingly complex vehicle systems, began consulting with Marcus on diagnostic procedures and technician training programs. One project involved developing diagnostic protocols for hybrid and electric vehicles, systems so new that traditional repair manuals were inadequate. Marcus's approach, treating each vehicle as a unique puzzle requiring systematic investigation, proved perfectly suited to these emerging technologies. The principles don't change, he explained to a group of factory engineers. Whether it's a 1965 Mustang or a 2023 Tesla, you still need to listen to what the machine is telling you. The tools are different, but the methodology is the same. 5 years after leaving Rick's shop, Marcus received an invitation that made him smile. The local Chamber of Commerce wanted to honor him as Small Business Owner of the Year. The ceremony would be held at the country club, where Rick Dalton was a prominent member. Marcus almost declined, but Elena convinced him to attend. "You've earned this recognition," she said, "and it's important for the community to see what dedication and integrity can accomplish." The evening proved to be a celebration not just of business success, but of the values that had driven Marcus's journey. Customer after customer spoke about the personal service, the honest dealing, the problem-solving expertise that had made Hernandez Automotive their preferred choice. Mrs. Chen, now in her 80s but still sharp, presented Marcus with a special origami crane folded from gold foil. "For the man who taught me that there are still people who take pride in their work," she said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Joe Martinez told the story of his 20-year-old truck, kept running through Marcus's skill and dedication long past its expected lifespan. That truck has over 300,000 miles on it, and it still runs like new because Marcus treats every repair like it's his own vehicle. James Morrison spoke about the collector car restoration projects, the attention to historical accuracy, the craftsmanship that exceeded factory specifications. "Marcus doesn't just fix cars," he said. "He preserves automotive history for future generations." Even some of Marcus's former colleagues from Rick's shop attended, now working at other locations, but still grateful for the mentorship he'd provided over the years. Danny Rodriguez, now a skilled diagnostician in his own right, credited Marcus with teaching him that mechanical work could be both technically excellent and personally fulfilling. The recognition was gratifying, but Marcus found himself most moved by the presence of his family. Elena, elegant in a dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. Rosa, home from college and radiant with pride in her father's achievements. His granddaughter Maria, now 7 years old, clutching a drawing of Grandpa's garage she'd created as a congratulations card. Rick Dalton did attend the ceremony, sitting in the back of the room with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. They didn't speak during the evening, but as Marcus was leaving, Rick approached him in the parking lot. "Congratulations," Rick said stiffly. "You've done well for yourself." Marcus studied his former boss, seeing the signs of stress and worry that hadn't been there 5 years earlier. Word around town suggested that Dalton's auto repair was struggling financially, unable to compete with shops that prioritize quality over quick profits. "Thank you," Marcus replied simply. "I suppose you're feeling pretty vindicated about now." Marcus considered the comment, then shook his head slowly. "Not vindicated, grateful. What happened between us forced me to discover what I was really capable of. Sometimes we need to lose something to find out who we really are." Rick seemed surprised by the response, perhaps expecting gloating or bitter satisfaction. "Well," he said awkwardly, "good luck with everything." As Rick walked away, Marcus felt an unexpected surge of compassion. Success had taught him that holding grudges was a waste of energy, better spent on building something positive. The 6th year brought new challenges and opportunities. Rosa graduated with her engineering degree and announced her intention to return home and join the family business. But with a twist. "I want to start a division focused on electric vehicle diagnostics and repair," she explained during a family dinner. "The technology is advancing so fast that most shops can't keep up. But with Dad's diagnostic methodology and my engineering background, we could establish ourselves as the regional experts." The proposal was ambitious and risky. Electric vehicle repair required different equipment, different training, different insurance considerations. But Marcus recognized the same entrepreneurial spirit that had driven his own leap into business ownership. They spent months researching the market, attending training programs, and investing in specialized diagnostic equipment. Rosa proved to have inherited both Marcus's mechanical intuition and Elena's business acumen, bringing a fresh perspective to customer service and operational efficiency. The electric vehicle division launched just as the local market began embracing hybrid and electric cars in significant numbers. Rosa's engineering background, combined with Marcus's diagnostic expertise, created a unique value proposition that attracted customers from across the region. Local news media covered the expansion, portraying it as a family business successfully adapting to changing technology. The story resonated with readers who appreciated seeing traditional values applied to modern challenges. But success brought its own pressures. The shop now employed 12 people, managed 2 specialized divisions, and maintained relationships with customers ranging from daily drivers to automotive museums. Marcus found himself spending more time on administration and less time with his hands on actual repairs. "I miss the simple days," he confided to Elena one evening. "When it was just me, a toolbox, and a broken car that needed fixing." "You can still do that," Elena pointed out. "You've got great people working for you now. Danny and Rosa can handle the complex diagnostics. You could focus on the cases that really challenge you, the problems nobody else can solve." The suggestion led to a reorganization that played to everyone's strengths. Marcus became the master diagnostician, taking on only the most difficult cases while mentoring younger mechanics. Rosa managed the electric vehicle division and handled business development. Danny supervised daily operations and trained new employees. The new structure allowed Marcus to rediscover his passion for problem solving while building the next generation of diagnostic experts. He developed a formal apprenticeship program, partnering with a local community college to provide hands-on training that complemented classroom education. Students from his university program began seeking internships at the shop, eager to learn from someone who combined academic knowledge with practical expertise. The shop became an unofficial research center, developing new diagnostic procedures and training protocols that were adopted by other repair facilities. Marcus's reputation in the collector car world continued to grow. He was invited to judge vintage car shows, consult on restoration projects, and speak at automotive conferences. Each opportunity reinforced his belief that mechanical expertise, when properly applied, was both art and science. But the assignment that meant the most came from an unexpected source. The local high school's automotive program, struggling with outdated equipment and declining enrollment, asked Marcus to serve on their advisory board. The visit to his old high school was both nostalgic and sobering. The automotive shop where Marcus had first discovered his passion for mechanical work was cramped, poorly equipped, and taught by instructors who seemed as dispirited as their students. "Kids today aren't interested in getting their hands dirty," the department head explained apologetically. "They all want to work with computers." Marcus walked through the shop, noting the obsolete equipment, the lack of diagnostic tools, the general air of resignation. Then he observed a class in session, watching students go through the motions of basic maintenance without understanding the principles behind their actions. What if they could see the connection between mechanical work and technology? Marcus asked, "What if we showed them that modern automotive repair requires both hands-on skills and computer literacy?" The conversation led to a partnership proposal that excited Marcus more than any business opportunity he'd encountered. Hernandez Automotive would sponsor a complete modernization of the high school's automotive program, providing equipment, training, and real-world experience opportunities. But Marcus wanted to do more than just donate money. He proposed teaching one class per semester, bringing real diagnostic challenges into the classroom, showing students that automotive repair was an intellectually demanding profession that offered both financial rewards and personal satisfaction. The first semester was challenging. Students accustomed to passive learning struggled with Marcus's hands-on approach. But gradually, as they began to understand the detective work involved in diagnosis, their engagement increased. Marcus brought actual problem vehicles to class, cars with mysterious symptoms that had stumped other repair shops. Students learned to gather evidence, form hypotheses, test their theories, and arrive at logical conclusions. The process was scientific, requiring both analytical thinking and creative problem solving. This is like being a detective, one student observed after successfully diagnosing an intermittent electrical problem. Except instead of solving crimes, we're solving car problems. Exactly, Marcus replied. Every broken car is a mystery waiting to be solved. And when you solve it, you've helped someone who was depending on you. The high school program's reputation began to improve dramatically. Enrollment increased as word spread about the quality of training and the job placement success of graduates. Several students went on to attend Rosa's old engineering program, while others joined Hernandez Automotive's apprenticeship program. Marcus found teaching to be deeply fulfilling in ways he hadn't expected. Watching young people discover their capabilities, helping them develop both technical skills and professional confidence, seeing them embrace the pride that came from doing excellent work, it reminded him why he'd fallen in love with mechanical work in the first place. 10 years after leaving Rick's shop, Marcus received a phone call that brought his journey full circle. Rick Dalton's voice was different, older, uncertain, stripped of its former arrogance. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I know I don't have any right to ask for favors. Marcus waited, curious about what could have prompted this unprecedented humility. I'm losing the shop, Rick continued. Business has been declining for years, and I can't keep up with the loan payments. The bank is foreclosing next month. The news was sad but not surprising. Marcus had heard rumors about Rick's financial difficulties, his inability to compete with shops that prioritize customer satisfaction over short-term profits. I'm sorry to hear that, Rick. How can I help? I've got 3 employees who are good mechanics, but they're going to be out of work. I know you probably don't need any more people, but I was wondering if you might consider interviews with them. They deserve better than what I was able to provide. The request was both unexpected and touching. Despite their history, Rick was trying to take care of his employees' futures. Marcus found himself respecting this final gesture of responsibility. Have them call me this week. We'll find something. Thank you, Marcus. I know I don't deserve your help, but these guys do. They're skilled, they're honest, and they work hard. They just had the misfortune of working for someone who didn't appreciate their value. The conversation ended with something that might have been reconciliation, or at least mutual understanding. Marcus realized that success had given him the luxury of forgiveness, the ability to help former adversaries without compromising his own principles. All 3 of Rick's former employees joined Hernandez Automotive in various capacities. Their gratitude was evident in their work ethic, their respect for the shop's quality standards, and their appreciation for an environment that valued their expertise. The expansion required moving to a larger facility, a former warehouse that Marcus and his team converted into a state-of-the-art automotive center. The new location featured 12 work bays, specialized equipment for both traditional and electric vehicles, a customer education center, and a training facility for the apprenticeship program. The grand opening celebration drew hundreds of people, customers, employees, students, fellow business owners, and community leaders. But the moment that meant the most to Marcus came when Mrs. Chen, now walking with a cane but still sharp as ever, presented him with her final origami crane. This one is made from white paper, she explained, her voice carrying clearly through the crowded showroom. White represents completion, fulfillment, the end of one journey and the beginning of another. Marcus accepted the delicate paper crane with hands that still bore the calluses of decades of honest work. Around him, the celebration continued, people sharing stories of exceptional service, praising the quality that had become Hernandez Automotive's trademark, expressing gratitude for the jobs created and the community investment represented by the new facility. But Marcus found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment, the humiliation that had become motivation, the risk that had become reward, the small acts of kindness, Mrs. Chen's origami cranes, James Morrison's investment in potential, Elena's unwavering support that had accumulated into something far greater than their individual components. Rosa approached, her own hands now bearing the honest stains of mechanical work. Dad, the reporter from the Business Journal wants to interview you. She's asking about your success story, how you built all this from nothing. Marcus looked around the bustling facility, seeing the employees who had found meaningful work, the students learning valuable skills, the customers whose transportation needs were met with expertise and integrity. The success was real, measurable in financial terms and community impact. But the true measure of his journey wasn't in the impressive facility or the growing business. It was in the relationships built through competence and care, the trust earned through consistent excellence, the knowledge that his work made a genuine difference in people's lives. Tell her, Marcus said, placing Mrs. Chen's white crane carefully in his shirt pocket next to his heart. That it wasn't built from nothing. It was built from everything that matters: skill, integrity, and the belief that everyone deserves to have their problems solved by someone who truly cares about getting it right. As evening fell over the celebration, Marcus stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The parking lot was full of vehicles representing every stage of his journey: Mrs. Chen's faithful Honda, Joe Martinez's ancient but perfectly maintained truck, James Morrison's latest classic car acquisition, Rosa's practical sedan, and dozens of others belonging to customers who had become friends, employees who had become family, students who had become the future of their industry. The mountain peak stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, unchanged from the day he'd first contemplated leaving Rick's shop. But everything else had transformed, not through sudden miracle, but through the patient accumulation of small victories, ethical choices, and the decision to value excellence over expedience. Marcus smiled, understanding finally that the true luxury wasn't in the expensive cars he now worked on regularly, or the financial security he'd achieved, or even the recognition he'd received. The real luxury was the knowledge that he'd discovered what he was truly capable of when his abilities were properly valued and applied. He pulled out his phone and called Elena, who was inside helping coordinate the evening's festivities. "How much longer do you think this will go on?" she asked. "As long as people want to celebrate." "But Elena?" "Yes. When it's over, when everyone goes home, let's just sit in the shop for a while. Just the two of us. I want to remember this moment, this feeling of having built something that matters." "I'd like that," Elena replied, her voice warm with the satisfaction of shared accomplishment. As Marcus returned to the celebration, he passed the wall where they'd hung photos documenting the shop's history. The empty building on their first day, the early repairs that had built their reputation, the expansion projects, the students who had graduated from their programs, the awards and recognition they'd received. But his favorite photo was the simplest one: Marcus and Mrs. Chen standing beside her Honda after its very first repair at the new shop, both of them smiling with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It reminded him that success, at its core, was simply the accumulation of individual moments when someone's problem was solved with skill, care, and genuine concern for their well-being. The manager who had once dismissed him as just another mechanic had been both wrong and right. Wrong about Marcus's potential, wrong about his value, wrong about his replaceability, but right about one fundamental truth: Marcus was, above all else, a mechanic. Someone who fixed what was broken, who solved problems others couldn't solve, who found deep satisfaction in the honest work of making things better than they were before. And in a world full of broken things that needed fixing, that was exactly what he was meant to be.